Hello everyone, and today we're going to be having a look at the Adventure Structure deck. I know everyone's probably sick and tired of seeing the Adventure deck, but I think it's very interesting to take a look at what the pure version is, and this will roughly represent what Konami actually wanted us to play when it came to the Adventure package. So this will be the second of the decks that I've reviewed. In comparison to the Machina deck, I'm not really all that impressed. I think this deck's a little bit stronger going first than the Machina deck is, but the overall power of the deck is one Lightning Storm away from being useless, one Raigeki away from being useless. But we'll break it down here. Like I said, just like in the first part, we're not doing a deck profile at the end. We're going to do one right now, and then it'll just be the 3 games. So first things first, how does the deck actually work? It all focuses around the Rite of Aramasir and the Adventure token. So all of these cards, the entire deck, is only really useful if you have on your field an Adventure token. The Adventure token being summoned by these 2 cards. That's where some of your consistency issues come in to begin with, because there isn't really a lot of alternatives to it. So this card is the deck, basically. So what does this card do? This card will summon out an Adventure token to your field, as well as playing a Fateful Adventure to your spell or trap card zone straight from your deck. So it is a very, very powerful card. The Adventure token just being vanilla 2000 attack and defense, but it's its name that matters. Fateful Adventure, of course, being a very strong card. Fateful Adventure, basically if a monster is summoned to your field, you get to add one of your Adventure token related equip spells from your deck to your hand. So you're going to add one of these 3, the details of which we'll get to in a second. It also has another effect which allows you to search your deck for a monster that lists a Adventure token in its description. So that'll be your Water Enchantress, your Magicore Warrior, or your Wandering Griffin Rider. One of the 3 you get to search for, and then you have to discard a card. So that's fine. Now the thing about the equip spells is that whenever they're sent to the graveyard, you can equip them from the graveyard onto an Adventure token. So the idea is that using the Fateful Adventure, you will add the equip spell to your hand, and then you'll discard that equip spell for its second effect, and then its effect, the equip spell will activate in the grave and equip onto your Adventure token. So that's the Rite of Aramasir and generally how that sort of works. How do you get to the Rite of Aramasir? You can get there through your Water Enchantress. Water Enchantress will banish itself from your hand or graveyard to add it from your deck to your hand. How do you get into your Water Enchantress? Through Fateful Adventure. So yes, you will play one to your spell and trap card zone if you don't already have one, using the Rite of Aramasir, but if you draw into one of them and don't have a way to go into your Adventure token first, then there's no harm in using Fateful Adventure itself to search for the Enchantress, discard the Enchantress, and then activate her effect in the graveyard to grab your Rite of Aramasir. So Fateful Adventure in and of itself is sort of a way to search for the spell card. Obviously it does weaken the overall power of your combo because that's a search you now can't use on something else. But you know, desperate times call for desperate measures. Now having a look at the other monsters then related to the Adventure engine itself, you have your Magicore Warrior. Very, very straightforward. You have to have an Adventure token on the field if you want to use this guy to attack. And if one of your monsters listing an Adventure token does battle during the battle phase, at the end of it you get to play one of these 2 trap cards to your hand, the details of which we'll get to in a moment. So this guy is basically just a 2300 beater that will search for a trap card. Your Griffin Rider is the more prominent of the 2 possible monsters. This guy can special summon himself out to the field just like the Magicore Warrior if you control a Adventure token. And instead of having offensive prowess, the Wandering Griffin Rider can shuffle itself back into the deck if you control an Adventure token to negate any card activation and destroy that card. So it becomes an Omni-Negate then, if you will, so long as you control an Adventure token. So the Griffin Rider is definitely the more powerful of the 2. Onto the and what are the trap cards, sorry, that our Magicore Warrior searches for? It can grab you Thunder Discharge, which if you control an Adventure token will destroy all of your opponent's monsters that have less attack than a monster in your field that is equipped with a card, basically. Then you get to take an equip card that mentions the Adventure token from your hand or graveyard and equip it, basically. So you choose one of your equipped monsters, everything in your opponent's field weaker than it gets destroyed, and then if possible you equip another equip spell from the graveyard. So kind of nice. It's okay, it's fine. And then you have Breath of Resurrection. If you have an adventure token, revive 2 monsters, and then equip an equip spell that mentions the token from your hand or graveyard, much like the Evertrap card. So this basically revive 2 from your hand or graveyard, and the other one is a pop bunch of cards. So they're both fine. They're both somewhat mediocre. You don't resolve them very often, at least I didn't. Most of the time the game was over by the time it was relevant. The Breath of Resurrection is not the strongest, considering you don't play very many monsters to begin with, and the Thunder Discharge, your monsters aren't huge most of the time, so you don't get, it's not as if you're, you know, wiping out entire fields of powerful monsters. Usually its impact is quite low, clearing out some minion type monsters at best. So moving in then to the equipped spells, and the equipped spells are going to be paired into a sort of lump with the field spells. So they sort of come in pairs. The only one that doesn't come in a pair is the one that everyone will be aware of, Dracoback the Rideable Dragon. As long as it's equipped to one of your monsters or whatever, you can bounce an opponent's card. So if it's equipped to your adventure token, you once per turn can target a card in your opponent's field, return it to hand. So very, very good at enabling OTKs, which is something the deck definitely needs. It does help with the Machina matchup a good bit. It does help against certain other decks, so 100% Dracoback's very good. Then you have the Starlit Papillion. So the Starlit Papillion basically reduces your opponent's monster's attack by 500 per monster listing the adventure token in its text. Now, that does not include the adventure token itself. So if you have one of these guys on the field, your opponent, as well as a token, your opponent gets reduced by 500. If you have 2, reduced by 1,000, so on and so forth. And that pairs up then with the field spell Forest of Lost Flowers. So long as Forest of Lost Flowers is face up, anything equipped with Starlight Papillion is unaffected by your opponent's activated effects. And if your adventure token destroys a monster by battle, you draw a card. So pretty straightforward. You've also got Danelle, the Noble Arms of Light. Basically, so long as this is equipped onto your card, you gain 500 attack per different adventure-related monster. And its related field spell, the Zaralam, the Dark Palace, will instead mean that your opponent can't activate effects during the battle phase. Again, once your adventure token destroys an opponent's monster by battle, you inflict damage to your opponent equal to that monster's attack points. So, underwhelming was my initial junction, and honestly, that's the opinion I'm going to stay. These equip spells themselves, to be paired, it's just too much. They also have a bunch of like little effects that don't matter, they're inconsequential, but the pairing, it's far too specific, far too much advantage needed. I don't like this equip package whatsoever, and the field spell package, not a fan. So take that as you will. The Forest of Lost Flowers and the Papillion is nice. That sometimes comes up, that's pretty handy. The Zaralam, no, it's not that great. And that's pretty much the core of the deck, realistically. That's pretty much it. You also have, in terms of what's not so core, you have Witch of the Black Forest, which when it's destroyed will add one of your adventure monsters to hand, so you can add the Water Enchantress or the Magic Core Warrior Relics, or I guess Planet Pathfinder, but that's not going to happen. So this, again, an underwhelming pick for the deck, but it is what it is. Planet Pathfinder, tributed search for a field spell. The field spells by themselves do literally nothing, so unless you've already got the rest of your setup, Planet Pathfinder is useless. And innately with the rest of your setup, because you're using Red of Aramesir, this guy can't even activate his effect. So what are you going to do? I think this guy's garbage in this deck. There's too many pieces in this deck that just don't work with each other, or that are individually very, very low impact cards, so I'm not impressed with this structure deck as a whole. It does come with the same level of staples as the Machina deck: Raigeki, Harpies, Monster Reborn, Pot of Desires, Lightning Storm. You've got Call by the Grave, the Twin Twisters, Double Imperm, and Red Reboot. So very strong staple cards, just like the Machina deck. The overall quality of the deck is rather low. You're basically relying upon the same old adventure package you would have been relying on in any other deck, and the trimmings are pretty much dead cards. The Magic Core Warrior comes up on occasion, it's 3 damage, I guess, but you would be better off playing your, tried and true adventure engine in literally any other deck. So that's my opinion of it. Again, we still have a few games to go over. Overall, very low impact deck. Wasn't a fan of it, but you guys can make that assessment for yourselves. If you do like what you're seeing and you want to see anything more, feel free to subscribe. Big red button down there, doesn't cost you anything to press it, and it really does help me out, so I would appreciate your support. And if you have any suggestions, recommendations, anything like that, throw them in the comments and I'll get round to it as soon as I can. But that should pretty much wrap it up. Let's get into game number 1. Alright, getting into game number 1, we are going first, which is great. We opened up pretty strong. We're going to use Pot of Desires here. We're going to grab 2 more cards. We're going to grab the Raigeki and the Duel. We're going to activate the Enchantress to grab Rite of Aramasir. We're going to chain to Rite of Aramasir our Wandering Griffin Rider to special summon itself out to the field. And now our Adventure token hits the field, our Griffin Rider of course being an Omni Negate. We also grab our Fateful Adventure. We'll use that Fateful Adventure to grab the Magic Core Warrior, discarding the Papillion. The Papillion then of course equipping itself onto our Adventure token since it was sent to the graveyard. We're going to special summon 4 of our Magic Core Warrior, grabbing the Draco back from the deck. We're going to equip Duel onto our Magic Core Warrior, and we'll call it a turn. We're going to keep Draco pack in our back pocket just in case. We set our face down card, that's fine. Our opponent goes Raigeki, so we're going to negate the Raigeki with the Wandering Griffin Rider. That is basically our 1 level of interaction native to the deck gone. Of course, we do have the face down impermanence. Our opponent sets a card face down and passes. So all in all, went pretty well for us. We're going to use Fateful Adventure to grab the Griffin Rider and discard the Draco back, since the Draco back can simply equip itself on from the graveyard. And once again, we're going to chain our Griffin Rider to summon itself. So that is completely fine. Draco back then having the ability to bounce an opponent's monster back to their hand. We're going to grab the Starlight Papillion as well from the deck because we might as well. We'll bounce that back and then we'll get swinging. So again, just short of lethal damage, and this is pretty much like about as much damage as you can feasibly put onto the board, at least on a somewhat consistent basis. You're not going to OTK anyone, and considering your only level of native interaction is a single Omni Negate, you're not really sitting all that pretty. But again, in this case, we don't really know what our opponent was playing, but it certainly was not enough to get past a singular Negate. So it is what it is. A lot of decks in this format in particular, because they've lost their toolbox, which was their extra deck, don't have the ability to play through too many interruptions. So even a single interruption per turn, and it is per turn, because it can be constantly searched through the Fateful Adventure. I will give the deck that. Being able to consistently search for the Griffin Rider every single one of your turns does add a certain level of power to the longevity of the deck. So that is what it is. Ultimately, you're not going to be OTKing very often, but you can pick apart boards with the Draco back and a few other things. So not terrible showing of the deck here. Let's get into game number 2. Alright, getting into game number 2, we're going second here, so it's going to test our ability to break boards, and we're going against Flounderies no less. So he's going to go for his Eagle in here off the bat, and we're going to chain Imperm. This is exactly why I think Imperm and Effect Veiler are going to be so powerful in the upcoming format. Basically being able to stop Flounderies is the name of the game. That pretty much stops our opponent dead in their tracks. They're going to pass turn over to us, and we're going to go for the Rite of Aramasir and grabbing the token and our Fateful Adventure. We'll special summon out our Magic Core Warrior, triggering our Fateful Adventure to grab a Starlit Papillion, not realizing I already had one in hand. Could have gone for Duel there, but it is what it is. We're not going to normal summon this turn, so we don't trigger the field spell. We're going to swing in, take out the Eaglin, swing into with the Griffin Rider and the token, deal an additional load of damage. We also get to set the Thunder Discharge from our deck. So that is at the very least going to be very effective against the Flounderies. Once he gets all the summons out of the way, he summons out the Rabina and the Eaglin, whatever he's doing. We flip up the Discharge, bang, nuke the board, and he has nothing to tribute then at that stage. So Thunder Discharge has its place in a Flounderies matchup. I do believe it does at the very least give a positive sort of fling there. So bear that in mind. It's not as if the card is useless. Definitely not. It's just not as powerful in a lot of matchups. But against Flounderies, really strong. So that's fine. Again, decent showing off the strengths of the deck and what it's actually good at. I'm not going to show off a deck and just criticize it or anything like that. I am going to at least show what it's good at before bashing it into the ground, which is my intention, of course. You can tell from the intro. But let's get into game number 3 then. Alright, game number 3, the final one of the video. We are again going second because who can win a coin toss around here? And speak of the devil, we're going up against Mishina. Gonna grab the gear for him and a Uniclasp or whatever that thing's name is. Unclasper, whatever. The Unclasper is going to send the Fortress to the graveyard, normal summon the Gear Frame. Gear Frame is going to grab the Ruin Force, and the Ruin Force is basically going to be fodder to be discarded for the Fortress. Fortress then, of course, being a big body, so our opponent has the Ruin Force and the Citadel in the graveyard, so while their field itself isn't imposing, they have a lot of follow-up. Even the Machine of Fortress itself will pop one of our cards the moment we get rid of it. So we're going to use our Rite of Aramis here to get a token onto the field. Going to go for the Magic-Core Warrior yet again. Our Faithful Adventure goes to resolve. He's going to hit it with Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit. That is really detrimental here. We do have another one, but unfortunately we don't get to search for an equip spell because we already attempted to resolve that effect. Gonna grab our Griffin Rider, discard Papillion. Papillion will equip on the Rite of Aramis here. Onto the Adventure token. We're going to activate the Forest of Lost Flowers. That means our Adventure token is now unaffected by opponent's activated effects. Swing in, get some damage across the board. We will take out the Fortress last, and the reason we're taking it out last is because if we were to take it out first, he would have the opportunity to destroy something before we got as much damage off as possible. So he has to activate Fortress, and he also has to chain his Citadel, regardless of which order he did it in. Whatever the second effect was, we were going to negate it. So he goes to revive his Citadel. We luckily have the Griffin Rider here. We can bounce it back to the deck. No Citadel for you, and because that's the card he went to target with Fortress, Fortress doesn't do anything. We'll swing across here for an additional 2000 damage, set the Thunder Discharge from the deck onto the field, and pass turn. So again, we're not looking terrible. It looks like we've cleaned up pretty well, except he has Lightning Storm wiping out all of our back row. Papillion luckily will equip back onto the Adventure token to at least do a little bit of reducing. It means now his Fortress isn't big enough really to take anything out, but he does have the Ruin Force, and the Ruin Force does not take prisoners. A 4100 attack even after being reduced, more than enough to rip through our field alongside the Fortress. So again, it's not looking pretty, and there's going to be an interaction here. I didn't expect it either, to be perfectly honest. We were going to go for our field spell, which is useless. Again, as I said, it does nothing by itself. Then into the battle phase he goes. He takes out our Fortress. Witch of the Black Forest is a non-optional effect. It has to activate, and because we're in the battle phase, Ruin Force can halve the life points of both players and negate the effect. So I would have survived this turn, except the Witch of the Black Forest being a mandatory effect caused us to lose life points, thus deleting us from the game. So it is what it is. So the deck isn't useless. It's not. It does have its plus sides. It does have some good things going on. But if you're going up against an opponent that has any level of recursion or any level of impact and power behind their cards, you're going to really struggle to keep up realistically, because your board is very easily dissected. You're relying a lot on equip spells, and equip spells, again, not the greatest. I'll be honest, relying on equipping cards onto a token, and a vanilla 2000 attack token, that's your win condition. It's not the greatest. It of course has its moments, but it's not reliant enough. It's not reliable enough to win on its own. Running the Adventure engine in any other deck will be far more effective than using the structure deck. So I mean, if you're asking me to giving it a passing grade or a failing grade, Machina deck, absolutely. That structure deck, passing grade, A star, 100% all the day. This is potentially a C. It's not the greatest. It will work. It will introduce you to Adventure. I don't even think it's a good introduction to Adventure. I'll be real. I think this is pretty low. The only reason I would even place it as a C is the Adventure. The core Adventure engine that we all use is still in there. The Griffin Rider and you know what I mean? So that's its only redeeming factor, but you can take that, extract that, and put that into any top tier deck, and it will work just as well, if not better. So that's where I'm going to leave it with here. Again, you guys feel free to post your own opinions down below. Let me know so we can get a wee conversation going, and let me know what changes you would make to keep the spirit of the deck true, but maybe make it a little bit better. Maybe dropping things like the Pathfinder, the field see, I mean, dropping the field spells, or even talking about the same deck then, you know what I mean? It gets a bit messy, but either way, let me know what you think down below. Subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see y'all in part 3.